Welcome back, 7th grade. Good to have you here. Before we get to our topic today, I want you to pause and look at this and give it some thought. This is good for scratch paper if you want to make any notes or anything. Doesn't need to go in your notebook, but this would be a great one to just stop and think about. I'm going to bring it back in the lesson. So I want you to have thought about this first. So just pause, give this some time and attention. And when you think you've got some good thoughts on this, carry on. All right, so today, having looked at that, today I want to teach you how to use a representative sample to answer a statistical question about a large group. So if you'll make this the title on the next free page in your math notebook, and then when you're all ready, give me your total concentration until we get to the we do. All right, so just some reminders from 6th grade statistics, which may have been some time. First, we talked in 6th grade about the difference between a statistical question and a non-statistical question. So non-statistical questions first are like answers or questions that just have like one single answer, so to speak. Like how much did Dr. Dober's car cost? There's like a number that would answer that question. You know, my car costs $8,000 or whatever. Statistical questions, the answers would vary. There would be a lot of answers to a question, like how much do cars cost? We couldn't just answer that with a number. Different cars cost different amounts of money. So that's a statistical question. We answer statistical questions with things like the average car or the median car. But it's a different thing. So like another statistical question, how many days do Americans think kids should go to school each year? That's the statistical question because the answers would vary. Some people might say more, some people might say less. Whereas how many days do students in Gwinnett County go to school each year? That has one single answer. In Gwinnett County, you go to school 180 days, or students do. Again, what connections class do Bay Creek Middle School students like best? That's not a number question, but it still varies, right? Some would probably like PE best, some would probably like art best, and so on. Whereas what is your favorite connections class? That has an answer. So statistical questions have answers that vary from person to person, and you have to answer them differently, whereas non-statistical questions just have an answer. So here's a statistical question for you. Tanya wants to determine the average number of books that students in her school read each month. So that's a statistical question because different people read different amounts of books, right? Some people read a lot of books, some people read no books, lots of people read a number in the middle. And so how many books do you read? How many books does a student at this school read each month? That's a statistical question. So we would answer that, with like mean, what's the average, median, what's the middle, mode, what's the most number of books, range, they read between 2 and 10 books or something like that. And so what's hard about this is like a whole school, a lot of the times you can't ask everybody. It's not reasonable to try to answer that question by asking every single student in an entire school how many books they read each month. So everybody in statistics, whenever we talk about everybody, we call it a population. And most of the time, we can't ask everybody. It's just not reasonable. And so if she wants to know in her whole school, like good luck getting every single student to answer that question. The population is not going to be a reasonable group of people to ask to try to answer this question. So what we do is we try to find what we call a sample, which means a small number of people who represent the whole group or the population. So it would be great if rather than asking every student in the entire school how many books they read each month to find, we could say, what if we could just find like maybe 20 people who give us a good idea of the whole school, right? So here's some options for how she could find a sample, right? She could ask just the students in her homeroom. That's about probably 20 or 30 kids. Would that be enough? Would that like tell her about the whole group? She could just ask her friends. She could just ask the students in the book club. She could just ask the first 25 students she sees on Monday morning. Or maybe she could ask like each homeroom teacher, sorry, typo there, to randomly choose 2 students from their homeroom and just ask 2 students from every class. Lots of options. Those would all be samples, which is to say a smaller group of people who maybe represent the entire class, the entire school, because that's what she wants to know. So which one of these would be the best thing to do? The question then becomes, okay, it's easy to find a sample. This is probably about 30 kids. This is probably about 30 kids. This is probably about 30 kids, 25. This might be a few more. This might be like 50. But it's way better than asking everybody. So how do you choose a sample is our next question today. And so some of these are going to be better than others, and let me tell you why. To figure out the answer to a statistical question where you don't want to ask the whole population, it's just too big or, too much of a pain. You don't just pick any sample. You need to make what we call a representative sample. And a representative sample means it does a good job of representing everybody, the population. Not every sample does that, and let me talk about why, right? So what if we took A? What if she just asked the 25 kids in her homeroom? Is it likely that the students in her homeroom represent the entire school? And they would not. All of the kids in her homeroom are all in 8th grade. Her school probably, like ours, has 6th and 7th and 8th graders. So if you only ask 8th graders in your sample how many books they read, you're not representing the whole school very well. So this is a sample, but it is not a representative sample. A representative sample has to be a good representation of the entire population, and this is not. And so what about her friends? Like if she just asked her friends? Well, again, that's probably not representative of the entire school. Probably, typically, maybe all of her friends are girls or most of her friends are girls, so it's not a good representation of the whole school. Probably most of her friends are roughly her age, so not a great example of the entire school. And people tend to be friends with people they're similar to. So it would be a lot of people maybe similar to her. And again, it's just hard to say like just her friend group would be representative of the whole school. So that is a sample. It is not a representative sample and probably would not give a good answer to the question. What about just asking the students in the book club? Well, that's really not representative because these people probably read the most. These are obviously people who love to read and are choosing to be in a book club, and so you only ask them, you're probably going to get an idea that the whole school reads a lot of books, which is probably not true. So this is also not representative. Ask the first 25 students she sees on a Monday morning. Again, then you're just getting like all the people who get to school first or are on her hallway first or something like that. You're not sampling from across the whole school. So like E would be a great one. E is probably the most representative sample here of our choice. Ask every homeroom teacher to randomly choose 2 students from their homeroom. So then you're getting 2 kids from every homeroom. And there's a good chance that just doing that randomly, you'll get a good idea of the whole population just from there. So that is finally a representative sample, where the rest were just samples. Okay. Open your math notebook. If you're in my class, there's no need to write this down. I'm going to print this and give it to you tomorrow so you don't have to write so much. If you're not in my class and you're just doing this to help yourself, this is going to be a lot to write. I apologize, but go ahead and pause now and put this one in your notebook so you have a great example to look back at. So I have this theory that PE is the most popular connections class at school. People seem to really like that one, and I want to see if I'm right. I want to ask people, what's your favorite connection? And I think PE will come up the most times, but can't ask everybody. My school is too big. I think there's 1,200 students here. There's no way I'm going to find out everybody's favorite connection in this entire school. So remember, everybody, please write down, that's called a population. And a lot of times asking a population isn't reasonable. Not always, but often. Depends how big the population is. You know, if you just want to ask a question about like your football team or something, it might not be too big, but a lot are. So, who should I sample? I need a representative sample. I need to find a smaller group of people that represent the whole group. That's called a sample. It's a smaller group, and it represents the whole. So that's what I want to do. So I put 6 options down here. Let's see which ones we would find to be the most representative. So starting here, ask everyone in my homeroom what their favorite connections class is. Not representative. My homeroom is only 1 grade level, and it's just people in my homeroom. So it doesn't represent the whole school. Maybe I have people who like to read more or less in my homeroom, plus I only have 7th graders. Not representative. What if I went to PE during connections and asked everybody in PE what's their favorite connections class? Again, not even close to representative, because most people who are in PE chose to have it. So of course they like it, and I'm going to get really, really, really inaccurate results to my question if I only ask the people in PE, because that's the people that want PE. So no good. Ask the teachers what they think the kids' favorite connections class is. Well, that's not even close either, because I'm not even asking the right people the question. If I ask my teacher next door, like, what do you think's the best connections? What do you think the kids like the best? Like, they could just be wrong. So that's not even asking the right people the question. So definitely not representative. What if I go to orchestra during connections one day and ask those students what their favorite connections class is? Not representative. Why not? Well, those are people that chose to be in orchestra, which is a different connections class than PE. There's a very good chance that a lot of them like that class and are going to say that class, and they don't represent the whole school. They represent the kids who chose to be in orchestra. So again, not representative. What if I randomly choose 5 students from every homeroom and ask what their favorite class is? That's a great way to do it. That's very representative, because I'm not picking and choosing people in a certain group. Representative. Sorry, I can't talk and write sometimes. That's a great one. If I take 5 kids from every class, I'm getting 6th graders and 7th graders and 8th graders from every class on every floor in every homeroom, and there's a good chance that that group will represent everybody in the school. That if the most of them say PE is their favorite, then the most of everybody would say PE is their favorite. Or if they don't say PE is their favorite, that most would not. Okay? What about ask every student who has ever attended Bay Creek Middle School what their favorite connections class is? That's how I would get the most accurate results, but I'm never going to be able to do that. That's not reasonable. That's not a sample even at all. That's a population. I just can't do that. I don't have access to everybody who's ever gone to the school. I don't know where to find them. I don't know how to contact them, and it would just take me forever. So y'all, that's how you find a representative sample so that you don't have to ask a whole population your statistical question. I hope that started to make some sense to you. I forgot to do this time. Let me pause and do that now. If you can distinguish between a population and a sample, you're off to a good start. If you can tell if a sample is representative of its population or not, you're off to a good start. And if you understand that asking a statistical question to a representative sample is easier than asking the whole population, but still gives an accurate answer to the question, you're also on the right track. If not, this is super new. Go back, watch this video again. I promise you'll feel even more comfortable when you get class tomorrow, and I can't wait to see you then.